Great, thank you, Donna. Oh, recording in progress. Thanks, Donna.
Sorry.
No problem. Good afternoon, everyone. As Donna said, I'm Robin Sahid, Assistant to the City Manager with the City of Santa Clara. And on behalf of the city and our partners here today, Project Equity, the Democracy at Work Institute, Sustainable Economies Law Center, and the U.S. Federation of Worker Cooperatives, I'm pleased to welcome you to today's event. And before I go any further, I want to acknowledge some of our city leaders that have joined us. Give me a minute as I go through the list. I believe it's Councilmember Watanabe. Kathy Watanabe is here. Councilmember Kevin Park, Councilmember Suds Jane. Thank you so much. We're excited to have you here today. You've all been strong advocates for this program. And just again, thank you for being here today and supporting our efforts. 1 second. So Santa Clara launched its worker cooperative program because our leadership recognized the importance of supporting locally owned businesses at risk of closure. And this became even more important as we realized the devastating impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. Initially, our worker cooperative program was thought to be primarily a succession planning resource. However, with the onset of COVID-19, we quickly realized that it's also a powerful tool that may be able to help some of our local businesses recover from the impacts of COVID-19. We're dedicated to keeping businesses that have grown in our community here and thriving for the long term. It's our hope that programs and sessions like this will help provide business owners like you with additional resources and options as you make important decisions about the future of your business that you work so hard to build. In this session, you're going to hear directly from local business owners, including one based right here in Santa Clara, that have transitioned to this business model. And we're really excited for this session because what better way to learn about worker ownership than hearing directly from owners that have gone through this transition. And with that, I'll hand things over to Donna with Project Equity, who will kick things off. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Robin. So my name is Donna Sky. If we could click on to the next slide. My name is Donna Sky, and I work with an organization called Project Equity, and we help business owners transition to employee ownership. I myself have been a business owner for many years in the Bay Area, so supporting business owners, thinking about their succession plan is something that continues to be something I'm really passionate about personally and of course professionally through my work at Project Equity. And my co-presenter today is Mo Man-Klang. And Mo, if you want to give yourself a brief intro, would be great.
Hi, everyone. As Donna said, my name is Mo Man-Klang. I'm the Policy Director at the U.S. Federation of Worker Cooperatives. We're the national network of worker-owned and governed businesses. So we're here to help connect and make sure that all of you are connected to the resources that you need. So I'll be around for the Q&A at the end of the session. I'm so glad to have you all here.
Great. We also have some very special guests today. We are really excited about this. We have owners. We have 3 owners of businesses who have elected to transition their company to worker-owned. We have Kirk Vartan, from a founder of a Slice of New York, a local business to Santa Clara, Jerry Scomer of Alternative Technologies, and George Chittenden from Adams and Chittenden Scientific Glass, also Bay Area companies. Next slide. So what is employee ownership anyway? So when we talk about worker ownership, also known as employee ownership, what we're talking about are companies that are owned by the people who work in them. So many people don't know about this ownership structure, and we're working really hard to change that, but they have been around for a really long time and have really shown that they can generate more value for everyone involved, the company and of course the people who work and own them. Next slide. So when owners consider their succession option, the good news is that there are choices, but what we found is that worker ownership can check many of the boxes and provide buyers, an option and a buyer that is right under their nose. So for many business owners, selling their company isn't easy. It's been shown that 1 in 5 businesses don't sell on the market, and about 15% that transition to family owned. Unfortunately, because of this, some of these companies may close down. So having a succession option, again, where the buyers can be within the business and can have a way to preserve the jobs and the asset within the local community is really an important option for all business owners to know about and consider when they think about their succession. Next slide. So there are many unique benefits to an employee buyout via worker ownership transition. First is that the owners can achieve getting a really competitive sale price. There's also flexible financing around ways that the company can be purchased. Owners also have the opportunity to retain influence and the pacing of the transition, which can be really beneficial for an owner who may want to, stay on for a few years as the transition's happening, or stay on long term. Some owners consider it for a retirement option, and many as well just want to change the structure of their benefit to really capture the benefits that are available once the company converts. As well, this type of transition also can preserve the legacy that many of you have built for the businesses that you've founded and have grown. You can preserve that legacy by keeping the culture, the jobs, and the assets in the local community where the business was built. Next slide. So at Project Equity, a colleague of mine once coined the phrase, if you've seen one small business, you've seen one small business. So, that's to say we know every business is unique. And ultimately the right solution for you should really be rooted in your unique goals and circumstances. But in general, we found that there are, certain readiness factors that are helpful to consider if you're thinking about a worker ownership transition. The first one is financial health. So the way that these deals or these transitions are structured, having good financial health is important. Holistically, we'll look at the past 5 years or so. As well, management bench, is there a team in-house already that can help to drive, the company's success through the transition and beyond? And is there a proven track record that this business has been successful? Employee ownership is a great option to strengthen a business and to continue it on its path for success and a strong future. So, but again, each business is unique, and we want to really kind of definitely emphasize that to you all. So if you check some of these boxes or kind of in the process of that, either way, we hope you give us a call, and we want to talk to you about this type of transition and the possibility for your company. So right now, through our partnership with Santa Clara, there are robust services available for business owners and service providers, including events, technical assistance, transition services, and networking guidance. The outreach and events are designed to build awareness and provide informational material. Technical assistance for exploration is also available through direct consultations. Again, through my work with Project Equity, I may be the first point of contact that you would speak to. We also have a full team that is part of the services that Mo works with, and she can tell you a little bit more about that as well when she talks about future events that we have planned with the city. And there's also legal services that are available. We can also help with finding financing, legal and tax guidance, or referrals when needed for any kind of transition. And a lot of these services, again, you can contact me directly. There's also SELC. They can provide legal support, and the U.S. Federation, who Mo works with, can provide peer advisory, feedback and assistance, best practices across worker-owned businesses, advocacy, regional network building, and we're all available and here to help you through that process. So with that, I'm really excited to transition into the next part of the event that we have, and where we're going to dig in and talk to three of the three founders that we have here today to share about their journey from transitioning to a worker-owned business. So our first guest we have is Kirk Vartan from A Slice of New York Pizza. So there he is. We have Kirk. Many of you may already know him. He has, again, some of the best pizza around. If any of you could hear, I have a little bit of a New York, New Jersey accent. So I think I'm quite a connoisseur in pizza, and A Slice of New York definitely delivers. So Kirk, welcome. Thank you so much for
Thanks, Donna.
time. So let's jump right in. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself and why you chose to transition to a worker-owned cooperative?
Yeah, sure. So originally I'm from New York City. I grew up there, moved out here to work in high tech. Like I think most transplants come from other places to occupy a space for high tech. And my personal craving for pizza is one of my childhood favorites. I never quite found it out here in California, as my wife Marguerite always used to hear me kind of bitch and moan about my home product. And so when I decided that I was going to leave Cisco, that pizza hadn't been one of those things that I hadn't found yet. And so we jumped right into that. And one of the things that was really important to us as owners is we always had ownership in our company. Cisco give you a little bit of stock, like this much, and it's a rounding error for the company, but it gave you a sense of pride and ownership, and we always wanted to incorporate that in our business. Unfortunately, when we started out in 2006, almost 15 years ago now, I can't believe it's been almost 15 years. The legal forces that we dealt with had no idea how to make that happen, and it just was not an option. So we did our own things around empowering our workforce, annual bonuses, reviews, things that we liked about corporate that gave a sense of pride and ownership in our business. But we always wanted to have some way to create that real ownership structure for our employees. We just never found a way until we stumbled on worker cooperatives.
Wonderful, wonderful. Can you tell us about the transition process itself, and if you had any help or guidance through that?
Yeah, so we actually created a business development team internally, and we met weekly on Sunday mornings before we opened. We had about 14 people that would discuss different things, and one of our teammates, Erin, she actually did the research and found there are two really main strategies for worker ownership. One is the worker cooperative, and one is the employee stock ownership plan, ESOPs. ESOP has a lot of regulatory and requirements and a fair amount of overhead and expense up front, so it didn't seem like a good fit for us. But the worker cooperative model seemed to be a natural fit for us because of our culture of employee empowerment, kind of pushing decisions to the individuals and giving them autonomy to work. We have two locations, our headquarters in Santa Clara. We also have one in Sunnyvale. And I'm the only manager. We have a very flat organization, meaning there is no hierarchy in our organization. I was kind of sick of that with corporate. And so we went kind of the opposite way. And so everybody's very empowered to make decisions on behalf of the business with full support of management. And the worker cooperative model seemed to be just a natural fit.
That's excellent. Well, thank you so much. We're excited. We're going to check back in with you when we have our full panel
Yep.
questions. Thanks Thank you, Kirk. So again, we are moving on to introduce a founder spotlight for our next guest, Jerry Scomer from Alternative Technologies. Alternative Technologies has been on a mission to empower progressive organizations with technology infrastructure they need to change the world since 1989. They're a Berkeley-based company and will complete their transition to worker-owned cooperative this summer. Welcome, Jerry. I'm so
Thank you.
happy to have you here today. So Jerry, can you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about why you chose to transition your company to a cooperative?
Right. Well, thank you for inviting me today. It's funny, when I started the business back in 1989, I actually had hair. And so I've gone through a lot of changes myself. But one thing that hasn't changed is the desire to live by the golden rule. And I thought all along that if I were an employee of a company, I would want to be treated the way I would want them to treat me the way that they wanted me to treat the company. And so that if we live and die in my business by the golden rule. We treat customers that way. And when it came time to sell the business, I did the typical thing. I kind of cast about with asked some friends who are in the industry, what did you do or how did you do it? And they went out and found a consultant or some company that sells businesses. And, I explored that for a little bit and it just felt wrong. There was nothing about it that felt correct. And so living in Berkeley, where we have our business, there were a couple of co-ops over the years that I had seen and admired. And I started thinking, well, what do I really want to do? And I thought, well, I have had employees work with me for 25 years. I'm not about to transition to somebody strange or who's going to not do the things that we have done and treat the employees well. And so for me, it came down to how can I serve my employees the way they've served me? And the co-op came as a great idea, and we put together an exploratory team. I empowered the management to explore the idea, and we contacted Project Equity, who I have to say have been outstanding in their guidance for us, and patient. We are not the best students in the world over here, but Project Equity has stayed with us, and we're just about to complete the deal. Selling, I'm able to get out and leave my company with the culture that I wanted, it's just been great, I guess is the way I'd phrase it.
Wonderful, wonderful. And how has the transition process been at your company? Can you share any, what that's been?
COVID, excuse me. I sneezed, COVID. COVID has been a real pain in the butt. And we've navigated those waters, and PPP, God bless it, has also been a blessing and a curse. And so it's slowing down the process. We would have been done by the end of the year, but for COVID and PPP. But we're rounding out of that and getting through it. We have to do some things to clear up our books off the loans for the PPP loan, not to get too technical with people, but until we do that, we can't get the loan from the bank to help buy me out.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Jerry, for sharing a little bit about this process and why you chose to become a cooperative. We're going to get to talk to you some more a little bit later on. So next, I would like to introduce George Chittenden from Adams and Chittenden Scientific Glass. Adams and Chittenden was founded in 1993, and they manufacture laboratory glassware and glass tools for scientific and industrial uses of all sorts in Berkeley, California. They transitioned to a worker-owned cooperative in 2019. Welcome, George.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me. Glad to be here.
Thank you. We're so happy you could join us. So I'd love to, if you could tell us a little bit about yourself and why you chose to transition your company to a worker-owned cooperative.
I partnered up with Tom Adams from a previous stint at another glass shop in Berkeley, R&D glass blowing in Berkeley. Tom had worked there for 2 decades, and I'd worked there approximately 9 years, and the business was sold to somebody who wasn't a glass blower and didn't really know what was involved with that. And we stayed there for 3 years, but we both felt, actually Tom left the company and I panicked. I said, man, don't leave me alone. So Tom and I dived in and became a partnership. We didn't incorporate. We have remained a partnership throughout. And it's kind of a precursor to the co-op model. I mean, we've been cooperating all along. We're equal partners, and the transition is not a stretch cognitively from partnership to a broader enterprise. The business has done nicely. We have a good reputation, and I think we have attracted artisans, people interested in glass blowers, fundamentally, to our business because of the way we approach things, and we're looking for cross training all the time. It's a difficult enterprise. It's a complicated enterprise. We have a lot of moving parts, a lot of custom work, a very large skill set, and just in terms of the physical manipulation of the material. So that presents a lot of challenges. Our crew at this point, is pretty young, mostly under 30. So that's been an interesting facet of this for me. I remember going on to YouTube and seeing YouTubes about boomers and millennials interacting in the workplace, and was a little shocked to find out that it's a pretty widespread phenomenon. And I've experienced some of that in this transition. But conceptually, the idea of cooperative approach to it seems great. We're horrified by the economic inequities in the Bay Area. It's been hard for us to attract people. People from around the country are afraid to come to the Bay Area because of the expenses of living, and our ability to pay people enough to live in this area is really a serious issue. And the cooperative model addresses some of that, and that's a really excellent thing. During the last 2 years, 3 of our colleagues in this world have closed their shops and basically just shut the doors and sold off the equipment for pennies on the dollars. And we considered that as well, but it just doesn't feel right. This is we see every day how valuable our services are. Even during COVID, we got busy during COVID, supporting people who are making precursors to drugs, research in various aspects of the whole COVID enterprise. So we understand that we fill a very valuable niche. We're a small enterprise. There's 8 of us total, but we get a lot done. And the cooperative thing really does seem like the perfect approach.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Can you tell us a little bit about the transition process itself?
Yes, we realized that we're part of the silver tsunami, aging boomers, aging out of their business, and there's a lot of businesses that close from that, and we understood we qualified that. Tom's a little older than I am, and he was going to go first, and our arrangement was I could buy him out, or one of the partners could buy each other out, but that wasn't going to happen at this stage in my life. So we started to think of the alternatives. We looked at the ESOPs as well, but our business is not large enough to really do that successfully. And the co-op model was a much, much better fit. And we heard about Project Equity on KQED and said, hey, let's give them a call and find out. And the rest is history. It's been almost 2 years now, so that we've transitioned.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you so much for sharing. We're going to bring all the guest speakers back on now. And we're excited to learn some more. And I'm going to hand the facilitator mic over to Mo again, and she's going to lead our panel discussion and questions. So for y'all, if you have questions, please press the Q&A in the navigation bar to send your questions to our moderator. And here's Mo.
Thanks, Donna, and thanks to all the speakers. That was it's always really helpful to kind of hear a little bit about what the process was like, and then what we have plenty of time to get deeper. So I encourage everyone to, as Donna said, add questions in the chat or using the question box. And we have a couple questions already, which is great. So I'm actually going to kick off with this question from Whitney, and I will I'll put it out to all three of the speakers actually. So what has been most helpful in educating your team members about having an owner mindset?
Yeah.
It's one of those really important questions, and because we're not all I think as a society used to this idea of like lack of hierarchy, but with still with the structure. So what can you share about how educating your team members has looked like for your business?
I could speak to that. It's a challenge, actually. And I think part of that is due to the age factor. And but the need, the absolute necessity of being responsible for the things you say you're going to do, and doing them efficiently and with all that stuff, it's going to take a while. And so I guess like reminding people, we heard a phrase while we went through the Project Equity process, and we're in touch with some of the other people who are converting to co-ops. And one of the conversions, the owner said he often asked the question about, hey, I don't hear you people thinking like owners. And I've adopted that kind of strategy. Said, this is how an owner thinks, and I speak for myself in that regard, but try to make the point about all the balls you have to keep in the air. And, little by little, it's going to take time.
And you said it's been about 2 years?
Yeah.
Right? That was a year, right? So, yeah, thank you so much. Jerry, Kirk, anything you want to add there?
Well, Kirk, you can go ahead.
Yeah, I'll add to that. The owner mentality is probably the biggest challenge that anybody has to overcome. And I think it's probably the most critical. It has to do with your culture of transparency and accountability and things like that. And, my biggest message to my team is, yeah, look, I'm the general manager. I run the day-to-day operations, but all owners in the room here, and ownership is not for everybody in our group. It's optional. We have about half our team as owners because there's certain qualifications in terms of minimum hours that you have to be an owner. But I don't want to be the only one that sees the details in the shop that need to be addressed. If I'm that guy, then you guys aren't owners. You need to have that ownership mentality that every little thing you see that isn't right, you need to take action on, and don't wait for someone else to do it like that. And it slowly happened. Like I watch people when they come up to the shop and they say, look, I need to speak to the owner. And I've watched our guys say, hey, I'm an owner, I can help you. That's the first step. Taking that, because otherwise it's like, here, let me get the owner. They're still stuck in that I'm the owner thing. And when people ask me, so you're the owner, right? And I'm like, well, I'm an owner. I'm one of them. There's 13 of us now. It's been almost 4 years. Yeah.
That's interesting because we have, in my company, we have about 40 staff. And I found little bit the opposite to be true. In other words, everybody takes care of their little turf just fine. And they've been doing it for years. They're almost too good at it and too siloed in some ways. And I found what I've been saying to them is you've got to learn to take risks, and you've got to learn to charge ahead with all due fear. And instead of just going home and never thinking about the company, I'm sorry, when you're an owner, you have to do some digging on your own and suggest things and take chances. And so I've found that the global picture is having somebody think about the gestalt or whatever it is of the company. That's where I find it challenging. But we put a team in place. I put a team in place to do that for the transition, but I can get into that if people are interested.
And you still got a little bit of time. You're just going through that process. They haven't embraced that yet, right? You're starting to seed that. You know, we've been in this almost, like I said, almost 4 years now, and it's, you know, the culture is still turning. Like we're still getting people on board in that mindset. And I think it's an ever evolving mindset because people either have that kind of ownership leader mentality or they don't inherently, but it can still be learned and grown and fostered. And I think that's really critical.
We've seen progress. Let me put it that way.
I think that's really important. I think what Kirk just said, it's a process, right? And it keeps going, right? There's never, we work with worker co-ops all day, every day. And what we do know is just like any kind of skill or business, it is really important to keep those muscles strong, right? And to keep learning and keep in connection with other people. I believe I heard George mentioned that they're also in contact with other businesses that are in the process of converting. That's also a really great thing. One of the things that we do at the Federation is help make those connections to, so that people have others to lean on that are not just a service provider, but actually just another owner in a different business. So you can share some of those lessons. I also shared in the chat a toolkit from the Democracy at Work Institute for businesses that are looking to learn more about democratic practices and have some like really just solid activities to work through. So that's a free toolkit, should be helpful to anyone, whether you're very new to worker cooperatives or have been doing this for many, many years.
Hey Mo, let me just add one thing, which I don't think they're the 7 principles of worker cooperatives, which I know you don't need to get into for this session, but one of the key ones that I always really resonates with me is one of the cooperative principles is co-ops help other co-ops and help each other. Like inherently built into the fabric of the principles of the business is wanting to help others. And that includes other co-ops, the community, et cetera. And I think that is a really critical thing is no co-op, even a competitive co-op that's in your area, they will help you and give you the books, their guides, their operating agreement, whatever you need, they will help you. And I think that's a really key. You have a big support structure out there to help you, as well as all these professional staffs like Project Equity and the Federation, Selk and Dawi. Thanks,
Kurt. I have a sort of a two-parter question, some questions we're getting from a couple of different people. How did you prepare people for the non-hierarchical structure? I know we've talked a little bit about exploratory committees and people that were kind of focused on the idea of the transition. Can you all talk a little bit about how that process has worked, and if any of the employees felt burdened by the transition, like have people left, have people chosen not to be on the ownership track? What does that look like for each of your businesses?
Well, I'll just jump in real quick. We make it optional. We have certain thresholds that we've defined. You have to, in our case, you have to be full-time. We've defined full-time as 25 hours a week. So we kind of set the bow low for what full-time actually represents so that it wasn't a barrier. And they have to continue to be on schedule for those 25 hours a week. And we make it optional. There's no pressure at all. And there are some people that qualify to be co-op members and choose not to. There are just a couple. Most are qualify are co-op members, but some choose not to, and then that's fine. The big difference between the hierarchical, I don't think has anything to do with how a worker co-op is set up, and the governance of how a business is strategically run and managed is very different from the day-to-day operation. You can have the typical hierarchy with 6 levels of government or of management if you want in your business and be a co-op. That has nothing to do with the ownership structure. And I think that's really important to distinguish between the operational structures that are in place and the governance structure that's in place. And I really didn't understand the difference between those two, even though I deal with a lot of government stuff. But thinking of the running of the strategy, the budgets, the committees, the boards, and all that other stuff, the finances, that's done at a high level, has nothing to do with the day-to-day operations. And the day-to-day operations are day-to-day operations.
Right, that's the model that we adopted. In fact, we still have management the way that I set it up. And there's a 3-person management team that is really responsible for the day-to-day operations, and everybody else has their job and they can be hired and fired just like normal, within the guidelines that we establish and all that. But we didn't change. I insisted on that, actually. A hierarchical structure would have been a disaster in my mind. They can adopt it once I'm gone, but while I was setting up the transition, I said for the transition and for the first 3 years, it's going to be this way because the industry is just too rough to have people debating how many computers can dance on the head of a pin.
And I guess our enterprise is operational. I mean, we're making stuff and we have to order stuff and get supplies and schedule it and train constantly for the jobs, cross train. And so we have a breadth of options. We're trying to not have roadblocks based on skill sets. And to that end, we had instituted basically a meeting, a weekly meeting to schedule the work for the week, who could do it, who might need training, who would show a proclivity for that kind of work. And we had a rotating member of the crew join us each week. So everybody got a chance to see what was at stake through our whole work schedule and understand what we were thinking about every time we got a job. Do we have the materials for that job? Did you ask them about this facet of what the gizmo is supposed to do? So, it would last for a couple hours, but everybody got exposed to the operational aspect of what was happening here years before we were turned into an official co-op. Transparency, basically.
That's great, George. I think one of the things that I think is one of the best aspects of worker cooperatives is the ability to build skills in that kind of way, to do that kind of like sharing and learning together. It might take a little bit longer, but in the end, you're building like a really strong skill set across a greater group of people that can keep the business alive and keep like the original goals of the business, right? And then the original kind of dynamic of the business alive through this kind of like co-learning together. There's a question from an attendee that actually is a really great question. Have you had business owners come and observe your day-to-day operations in order to learn how worker co-ops operate, as well as offering other resources you mentioned? And maybe I'll sculpt that question a little bit to say, would you be open to that? That's something actually that I don't know too much about in the conversion space. At least I do know there are a great many worker cooperatives that do visits with each other, and also when we have in-person events, we always do tours of co-ops. But I'm curious if you've actually been in person. I know during COVID that's a little bit harder, but if you've had people come in to actually just see how your business is working.
No.
Actually, I had a couple folks roll through. When we were doing our initial research, we went up to Arizmendi and talked to Tim. He was very gracious and gave us tours of Cheeseboard and his Arizmendi practices. And honestly, I think most co-ops that if you approach them would be receptive to that. It'd be a little challenging depending on what your industry is on just kind of hanging out for a day and observing. But I think it could be combined with observing a little bit, going offline a little bit, and then coming back and researching that and just engaging that way.
For us, it was a little bit the reverse. We invited co-ops to come to us. And when we were trying to decide, Rainbow Grocery, for example, who is also a client, decided that they were, well, we called them up and said, come on in and talk to us. And we've, throughout the process, we've, as Kirk points out, co-ops help co-ops. You just have to call them and they immediately open their doors and welcome you and do everything they can to help you succeed. So it's a great camaraderie. And they were very helpful. Rainbow Grocery in particular was great to talk to. They kind of freaked everybody out when they talked about the hive mentality, but we processed it.
For those of you who may not know, Rainbow Grocery is one of the biggest and the oldest co-ops in the country. One of my favorite facts about them is they're, I think, the #1 retailer of granola in the entire country. But they've been a very successful worker cooperative for a great many years. So I'm so glad that you connected with them. So here's a question for all three of you, and I think Jerry, you might have hit on this a little bit, but can you talk a little about the cost and the time to transition to a co-op? I know for George and Kirk, you've already gone through the process, and that Jerry, you're still going through it a little bit. Can you talk a little bit about how long it took for your co-op, and what does that look like cost-wise?
I'll go ahead, George. I keep talking first. You go, George.
No, you're doing good, man. It's great to hear you. Our process took about a year and a half. COVID was obviously a huge deal for everybody. And that did have an effect on our transition, post-transition. I had an effect on our maturation. But the process was about a year and a half, and Project Equity was instrumental in guiding us through that transition, lining up the financial bits, lining up the legal help, the legal framework. But we couldn't have done it without Project Equity for sure. We were too busy, actually, is what it amounts to, but they were invaluable to help us happen. I'm not sure I addressed your question.
It was just the cost and the ballpark cost and the time. So
the cost, I don't think it was huge, a huge cost. I mean, it wasn't a deal breaker for sure.
No, it seems like you're well on the way. I think one thing that I'm sure Project Equity could help with, and any number of the service providers that we're working with, including SELC and Democracy at Work Institute, is helping to figure that out. It's different for every business. I will say, I'm not usually the person that's embarking in the costing and the kind of timelining of those projects, but I think it does depend on like how big is your organization, what industry are you in, like kind of understanding where the business is. So it's very unique, as Donna said earlier. Once you've seen one small business, you've seen one small business. So it's definitely different from business to business. So great. Any Kirk or Jerry, anything you want to add?
Yeah, no, I think it's consistent. It's, to year and a half. In our case, I think for a business of, a modest sized business, $1 million to $2 million business, I think you should expect, in the, $15,000 to $25,000 range. We spent a little bit more. We were closer to probably 40. but we deliberately spent extra time and detailed and paid people extra. We did kind of full service so that we could document everything and make those documents available to others, to provide that for others, to hopefully short circuit the next organization that wants to go through that, so they don't have to go through the pains that we went through to document everything. We get them maybe 80-85% of the way there, and maybe they can convert in 3 months or 6 months or something like that. The biggest challenge isn't the conversion process, it's getting everybody up to speed on what a conversion actually represents and getting people in that ownership mentality. What does it mean to actually lead, govern, and run an organization? Working is the easy part. It's the governing part that becomes a challenge for people that are just unfamiliar with the finances and the liabilities and the risks, and how do you balance those things and things like that.
For us, the costs have been not insignificant. We have found that our process has taken about 2 years, and we have carved out a transition team of 7 staff people who use company time to get all the bylaws and the legal matters and all that taken care of. And then there's the attorney's fees and things like that. But it's been worth it, but for us, it has not been insignificant.
Thank you. I have a very straightforward one. So if any of you have some quick answers to it, and we're getting to the end of the time and we have a couple more questions left, but one very straightforward one is, has it been challenging to shift your accounting practices or to find a CPA with co-op experience? Like, how have you approached that that piece of your business during the transition and beyond?
I'll jump in quickly on that. It's been very straightforward and easy to do. I think it was actually it's better now than it was in the past, because now we actually have professional organizations that deal with those functions. They're market rate businesses. Wegner, I think, is the one that stands out that I think every co-op uses, and they're located in Wisconsin, and they do a great job. They know exactly how the co-op law works, and they know how to do that. There are local attorneys that handle it, from Selk, which we reached out to initially, to Tuttle in the Bay Area here, and others. So the answer is it's very straightforward.
I'm also adding a link in here to the Federation Service Provider Directory. You can actually search in there for technical assistance in the areas of financing and bookkeeping and things like that. So I think absolutely Wagner's is one of the best and I think longest running businesses that works with co-ops and is really well versed. They actually run a tax preparation webinar for us every year for worker co-ops. But there's several more across the country. So I encourage people to check out that link. So as we're wrapping up, we have about 5 more minutes left. And one thing I'd love to hear as we wrap is, as an owner, what has been the most valuable lesson you've learned about co-ops that you didn't know, or that you think could help future owners when they're looking at a co-op? On my screen, you're pointing at at the ends of the screen. Maybe I'll
I pointed at George.
Oh, great. We were both going to pick on George.
Okay. I didn't understand the depth of that maturity issue going into it. And I think, I was optimistic and hopeful that people would see the goodness of the approach and the goodness for everybody involved. But it hasn't panned out as smoothly as it could have. And I wonder, in retrospect, had I been more alert to those indicators and some of the people involved, I might have been able to address it in a different way. But that's been one of the hangups, the more difficult aspect, the most difficult aspect of this transition for me personally, is the complications with people. Not everybody, but 1 or 2 individuals. I should have thought about that a little more deeply before engaging with these people, because we're partners then. I had a partner for 25 years, and we were good together. I've been married a long time, and I thought I didn't understand that it was going to be complex on that level beforehand. Now I do, and I would have made some different choices in that regard.
Yeah. It's a very different situation than I think most people are used to, which is a challenge in some ways, and also is liberating in a lot of other ways, right? So the idea of being a participant in the ownership of a business that you've been kind of working at as an employee for so long, it's a transition. So thank you for lifting that up.
For me, it was coming to the zen of the whole deal. And by that, I mean, instead of approaching it like I would a business deal, I realized, and it was actually another owner who clued me into this. He's down the street, the solar power people in Berkeley. And he said, oh, you got to get over that. You can't maximize the deal. And that was a wake-up call for me. I realized that I needed to get that out of my head, and that there was going to be a cost, and it was the right thing to do. Therefore, it was priceless. So that's the way I looked at it.
It's interesting to hear those two, and I hear all of those things. Like, I think at some point I felt all of those experiences. I think the biggest takeaway for me is the value of transparency and being candid with people and being honest about what their choices and decisions mean and how that affects business, and to take the business seriously. Don't just expect it. Don't be entitled about it. You need to put work into it and understand what that means and put the work in. And listen, we've been at this almost 4 years, 5 years if you include the transition time, and we're still getting people up to speed on that. And I can assure you, if you ask people how to read a P&L on our team or tell you what the board's job is, you'll get 15 different answers, and probably half of them will be right. So, but that's okay. To me, this is a learning thing. And I watch people, the maturity of our team and their contribution change, their mindsets change. And when you see that happen, that to me is the priceless part, because that never would have happened had we not gone through this process. And I don't believe that, you can, when you build the transition and the pricing structure and the sale and all of that, that's done. Everyone's unique. Like you can get you 85% of the way, but the reality is what it looks like is up to you. And if you can visualize it, like we have earn-out agreements based on performance, so that if we didn't have to burden the business with a sale of a price of this, we could bring it down here, but we'll get it up to here if the business performs well. And frankly, that puts skin in the game to make sure it does. And if the co-op message is everybody wins. If you can think of the scenario where everybody wins, including the owner, and the owner doesn't get gypped or doesn't get scammed or doesn't get taken advantage of, including the workers, they don't get scammed or taken advantage of. All your contract labor that's out there, the attorneys and all, everybody gets kept whole. If that's your guiding principle, it's all good, because then you will get a fair deal. You're not going to get ripped off. I'm not going to get ripped off. The employees aren't going to get taken advantage of, and everybody gets made whole. And that's the winning factor on this. And that's why it's resonated so strongly for me and my wife, is because that's how we approach things, and we always have. And this is a way to legally bind that philosophy into a business. And so that's why I strongly advocate for it. And I do what I do, volunteer time, because I strongly believe in this, and we just need a lot more of this out there.
Thanks for bringing us home, Kirk. I will also offer that, this past year has brought into very sharp focus just how difficult it can be to run a small business, right? I know a bunch of you have mentioned that this last year has been really difficult. And one thing that we saw across all the worker co-ops in the country really is that they were, because of this kind of participatory governance and the ability to have a little bit more voice in how the business is structured and how the business is run, we saw it made worker co-ops uniquely positioned to actually get through the crisis a little bit better, because they were able to understand from many different angles, what are the issues both from the actual business standpoint and from like a family standpoint, and the perspectives of each of the workers were equally as important in terms of figuring out how to pivot and adjust the business in a time of trauma and of really uncertainty for the businesses. So I think, you know, not being a business owner myself, but someone who works with them very often, a really valuable lesson that I learned over the last year is that, you know, just how the idea that you already had structures to address questions and business pivots as a worker co-op, and that really helps to get you to an answer really quickly in terms of like what can you do together. So we're just about at time, and I know thank you to everyone who's been really active in asking questions. I know that maybe I'll part as I hand off to Robin to help close us out a little bit and talk a little bit about how the city can support is, you know, I saw a question here from Partho about setting up a Costco type hybrid store in Santa Clara. And, you know, there are service providers, TA providers, called developers like Project Equity and SELC and the Federation who can help make that happen. And the city is really prepared to support that process. So Robin, I would love to hear, you know, if you have anything else you'd like to say in terms of how the city is going to be supporting this initiative moving forward, and anything else you want to say to wrap up.
Sure. Thanks so much. Thank you, Mo. Thank you, Donna. Thank you to our panelists today, Jerry, George, and Kirk. I learned something every time I listen to one of these sessions, and this one was very informative. You can't beat hearing directly from people that have gone through this. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you for participating. Really quickly, I do want to acknowledge Mayor Lisa Gilmore. She joined us for this session, and she was a very early advocate helping push this initiative forward for the city. So I'd like to acknowledge Mayor Gilmore and offer, if we can move her over, if she'd like to say a few words. I'd like for her to speak and just express her thoughts on this program.
Hi, can you hear me? Can anybody hear?
Yes, we can. Yep.
I don't know if you can see me, but as long as you can hear me, that's even better. I just want to say that I've been very supportive of this. When Kurt brought it to my attention, it seems like a few years ago, it took him about 6 months to explain it to me because I didn't understand and I had so many questions, but it's evolved so much, and I appreciate all the candid conversations today. Also I know on the call they were introduced earlier as Councilmember Kathy Watanabe, Councilmember Kevin Park, and Councilmember Suds James, who are also interested in this as well. I think this is a wonderful opportunity for our city, and that's why I supported it in the first place. We have so many small businesses that we value in the city of Santa Clara, and I wish we had this years ago, so maybe we could have retained some of the businesses that we lost. But I think that most of all, it helps our businesses stay afloat. And it also gives the employees the ability to have an ownership, which in turn, I've been in real estate for almost 40 years, and there's a thing that we call pride of ownership. Whether it's a real estate property or a business, it gives the employees a sense of accomplishment, you know, confidence, and the pride of ownership. I think the city's responsibility in this is education. And that's why we have partnered with the experts, Project Equity and others, because we have to make the process less complicated, less scary, and easy. And we need to provide the resources and education to help with that transition, and to make it, have a toolkit to make it more affordable and easy and successful for our community. So I fully support it, and I fully support what everyone's doing to help everyone. And I do appreciate the comments today about some of the pitfalls. I also want to thank Mission College for what they have done and our partnership. And I think that's the key to this, is all the partnerships we have with Mission College and Project Equity. Everybody together, we'll get it right, and we'll get the toolkit so someone could just come in for a very small fee, sign up. It's easy, it's understandable, and I think that will help us retain these much beloved businesses in our community. So thank you for letting me say a few words. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mayor Gilmore. Mo, I believe I'll toss it back to you. I think you have a few closeout slides, but to our businesses out there, this isn't the end of the conversation. If you have questions, please feel free to reach out to me and the city, and we're here to answer questions. So Mo, take it away. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Robin, and thank you so much, Mayor Gilmore, and to all the representatives. I know there are a few on this call. Thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate you spending time with us today to learn a little bit more. We want to let you know that, as Robin said, this is not the end. There are many supports available to anyone who's interested in converting their business to the worker co-op model. We have a worker co-op fundamentals session coming up on June 10th. Entity formation for California cooperatives was really just, how do you legally do those steps, and how do you choose what is the right entity to convert to in terms of like the actual legal business structure. And then there's a follow-up session, legal steps in the worker co-op conversion and business owner forum, that's going to be happening on August 9th, which is it's going to be a little bit of the legal steps and a little bit of what we had today. So hearing from a couple more owners and being able to ask some more questions. And then finally on August 26th, financing for worker cooperatives. So, how do you actually finance this? We have many different people working towards ensuring that there are many different resources in terms of how do you fund the transition to a worker co-op model. So you can learn a lot about that on August 26th. Thank you so much, especially to Kirk and Jerry and George for participating and sharing your expertise with us. It was, I learned quite a bit, and I'm very excited that to have these connections cropping up so that people can see what it really takes to go through this process of turning into a worker co-op. So if you want to learn more about the initiative, you can go to santaclaraca.gov/worker cooperative. You can definitely sign up for a free consultation with Donna at projectequity.org. And if you're interested in partnering with the City of Santa Clara, you can reach out to Robin at our SayHID at santaclaraca.gov. Thank you so much again for your time. You'll receive a follow-up email with information and a lot of links. So thank you once again, and have a great rest of your day.